So Gazpacho is a band that's been at it for over 2 decades at this point, and they've been quite prolific during that time, turning out 10 albums between 2003 and 2020. Now, following their longest space between albums, they've just now finally released album number 11, entitled Magic 8 Ball. So is the album any good after 5 years of work? Is this another in a flurry of strong late year releases we've been seeing this month? Will I stop asking questions and just tell you what I think already? You cannot be surprised by that answer. Hey there, Prog Noggins. Dave here. This is Bleeding Edge with your new album review. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. The band Gazpacho, the album Magic 8 Ball. Now, this was 5 years in the making, or at least it was 5 years of a gap between this album and the last one, which is the longest Gazpacho has gone between albums. These guys usually crank them out at a minimum every 2 years, I think with one exception. So this is unusual. I don't know what contributed to it. And you know what? If the product is good, I really don't care. Take a long time between albums if you want to, if you turn out great music. Really, that's all that matters, right? So, the band is made up of, this time around, Jan Henrik Ome, I think, or Ome, on vocals, Thomas Anderson on keyboards, Jan Arne Vilbo on lead guitar, Mikhail Kromer, or maybe it's Michael Kromer, on violin and guitar, Robert Johansson on drums, and Christian Torp on bass, rounding out the sextet. I believe, I'm not 100% certain, because reasons, that the album was self-produced by them, so they did all that work themselves. And it's a high concept album, high thinking concept album, whatever you want to say. It's an album that talks about the fickle finger of fate and how our choices can, in their words, strip away who we thought we were. Deep thinking stuff, folks. This is nothing small. This is no lightweight stuff that they're throwing out there. And the album consists of 8 stories, also known as 8 songs, about people taking chances with random fate, taking chances, finding themselves at a crossroad, looking back over what happened and kind of wondering what happened, basically. So 8 songs, 46 minutes. Now, before we get into the breakdown, I'm going to take a moment and say, 1, don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't mind. Help Bleeding Edge grow. It's always good to have more folks along for the ride. Number 2, my methodology. For those that are new here, I break every album down into 4 categories: intellectual, innovation, technical, and emotional. Score them all on a scale of 1 to 5. Then I average those out and get a raw score, and from there I might put on or take off a personal enjoyment modifier that helps me put the album about where I feel I enjoyed it compared to what the raw numbers say. I try to be, as much as I can, as objective about this stuff as possible. The enjoyment modifier is where I put in my subjective feedback for the album. So, as always, we start with intellectual. So, as I said, this is very deep stuff. This is high-level concept music here. A theme along the lines of fate and choices and consequences and what happens, how our choices affect us in the long run, how we sometimes can look back and wonder what happened. That's pretty cool stuff. I dig that. I have always been very much a person who deep in the thought processes of Neil Peart, has always been one to think in terms of individual responsibility and accountability for our actions, and recognizing that in some ways what they talk about is people out here that maybe get the idea that, hey, things all work out, everything is going to be fine. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And if you just leave it up to fate and sometimes don't put your own hand on the wheel, shit can go sideways on you, to put it simple. So this is an album about how human foibles create the idea of a world that eventually just works out for people. And, well, having to deal with the fallout when it doesn't. And that happens a lot, really. Breaking down the idea that we can beat the house, in the old gambling terminology, the idea that we can beat the house, that we can both indulge in over reliance on the idea of self determination. Also, at the same time, the belief in, hey, universal balance, karma, things go around and come around through random chance. I don't know about that. The idea of random elements deciding the fate of many, many people seems a little too close to the thinking of Thanos for my choice. So, those that want to dig into that, good luck to you. But whatever happens, the album really makes you think. And lyrically, it comes across very strong in illustrating the ideas, at the same time leaving a lot of space open for individual interpretation. I know at least one of the songs, Magic 8 Ball, the title track, or not Magic 8 Ball, 8 Ball, the title track, no magic on that, so it's not a title track. Get myself all tripped up. Anyway, the song 8 Ball, apparently, as described by the band, digs into the idea of oppressive cult life, which knocks me out because I had it boiled down in my interpretation when I listened to it. The idea of somebody in the financial and investment world BSing their way through things and trying to get some big results, but not quite coming up the way they want to, but trying to cover it up through the magic of numbers and accounting. Clearly, I was off a little bit, but then again, I don't know. Maybe the world of high finance is its own cult. You decide. I'm just going to say the fact that it leaves room for interpretation and one can come to more than one conclusion is kind of a cool thing. And at the same time, they got a point across. I always dig that kind of writing, and it's not an easy thing to do. They perform it with aplomb, and I give them a 5 on intellectual. Now, moving on to innovative. I'll be blunt. There's nothing here to me that I would say necessarily stretches the boundaries much of Prog or of Gazpacho as I know them. I will admit to not being deeply knowledgeable about Gazpacho. I am familiar with their work and I am familiar with them. I have not done a full review of their catalog, so I could be wrong. Those of you that know them better, let me know. Am I wrong in thinking that this is not exactly them really redefining the boundaries of their craft, of their music? I don't know. I will say it's very finely crafted prog of this sort of mostly ethereal variety. It does have these occasional detours into more powerful, heavier, almost rock. And I say almost rock. We'll get into that a little while here down the road. But it's well done, and it's very nice, and it's very cool, and I think it fits very nicely in their wheelhouse, and a lot of folks that enjoy modern-day prog along the lines of IQ and Marillion and things like that will enjoy this as well. And actually, if you're listening to those bands, you probably already know this. So what I'm saying is I don't know there's any great revelations here, either for prog in itself or for the band. So I'm going to score this one a 3 and just say, hey, they didn't go backwards. I don't know that they moved forward much. Looking at the technical side, I think if you are familiar with Gazpacho and bands similar to them, I think you know that this is a band and, in turn, an album much more focused on precise orchestration. There's not a lot of space there for improvisation or showy pyrotechnics. Heck, there's not even really much in the way of what I'd say solos in this album. Nobody really takes a turn to stand out and get the spotlight. The band is working as a whole throughout the album, and they know where they want to go musically, and they are very clear on how to get there. And in a certain sense, I like that because there's a lot of attention to detail and somebody really very finely orchestrating and crafting their music. So if you're looking for solos, if you're looking for pyrotechnics, you're not going to find that here. Everybody in the band contributes to the whole, and the whole is really how we, the listener, experience it. And I think that's exactly how they intended it to be. Matter of fact, I feel confident saying I know, but I didn't ask them, so I don't know. I think I'm just probably accurate in that assessment. Really, it's in that sense, then, it's hard to rate technicality when the individual players have basically submitted themselves to the collective goal. And that goal isn't to overwhelm the listener or massively impress them or show off. It's hard to know, but the fact that when you have an orchestra and you've got all these different pieces doing their parts with precision together, that's easily as impressive as a lot of other stuff. And I think that's where these guys are here, is that orchestration, that coherence, the synchronicity, whatever word you want to use. They work together, very finely tuned instrument, if you don't mind the pun. So I'm going to score that one a 4. On the emotional side, the emotional response I think most folks would get from this is probably going to depend on exactly how, one, the listener experiences these stories of loss and failure and maybe regret and taking chances. It also will depend on exactly what you want your music to do and sound like. For me, the music itself is really very pleasing, and I enjoyed even when the dreamier, the what was the word I used earlier? Ethereal. The more ethereal side of things blossomed into these higher energy, heavier parts, these crescendos. I enjoyed that as well, especially in most cases they had a nice build. They were often a bit of a slow burn with these elements adding until next thing you know, you've crested a hill, basically, when you didn't even really realize that the terrain was being elevated, if I can mangle the heck out of that metaphor. So that I dug. And for me, though, I'd say those bumps were slight. And I used the word hill with intention versus, say, a mountain. They weren't big crescendos, but they were notable, and you would feel that. And I found the overall exercise to be pleasant, but also more intellectual than emotional. So it's kind of hard to feel emotionally charged with something that's so precise, so thought out in advance, and so intellectual in its content. This isn't the kind of stuff that hits you with passion. I like to describe it as the work of a highly talented and patient craftsperson, as opposed to, I don't know, the flightier, more chaotic and passionate auteur. Both of them have a place in my world, and I enjoy both types of music, as I did enjoy this album. It's the passionate auteurs that tend to get me in the heart more so than the head, as this one does. They're both impressive in their different ways. Just saying that the latter tends to reach my core better than the former. And there's really not a problem with that. But I will say the emotion meter moved a little bit. We'll give this one a 3.25. All right, so let's take a moment. Let's review our scores. Intellectual was a 5, innovative 3, technical 4, emotional 3.25. That gives us a raw score of 3.81. I got to say, adding a 0.25 here and there really gets more variety in the raw scores, which I'm enjoying, considering how far we've taken into the year before I finally figured out that little morsel of information. Looking at my other thoughts about this album, and just to summarize a bit, they always seem to be more orchestral than anything else, as I noted. And to a degree, for me, that means I don't know if I would exactly call them rock. They may, in many ways, be closer to post-rock in some ways than rock. There's not a heavy reliance on heavy rhythms and all that, but there is rhythm. But oftentimes it's rather understated, quieter until the crescendo called for it. And again, the guitars could be lilting and lightly strummed and kind of blending in with the overall ambience of the thing and the ethereal nature of the music until called to do otherwise. And then they became more prominent and heavier, maybe a little distortion added. All those kinds of things those are the moments where I would maybe call it rock, whereas the other parts, a little less so. Not a problem for me, just making note of it. It's in some ways almost felt weird to call it prog rock or refer to it as rock because they kind of weren't there. They were dreamier than that, so to speak. But that's it. And they rarely went outside of those limits they seem to have set for themselves, that they found their wheelhouse and they live in it. If I can pull out a little Lord of the Rings, it's a lot like Tom Bombadil. They live within boundaries that they have set for themselves and will not willingly venture beyond those. And that's all right. That's very cool. Tom Bombadil was a cool character, and Gazpacho is a cool band with a cool album. Very consistent album too, really. And that's the thing. When you know your wheelhouse and you know your boundaries and you know where you want to play, consistency usually follows that. So all the songs are very much of the same high level of quality, though they didn't all necessarily stand out firmly from one another because of that consistency. There are two exceptions on this album for me. One of which, be patient, and I will review that for you and talk about that for you in a moment. And it's a lot to do with its energy. The other one, again, back to that, what I mistakenly said, title track for a moment there, but 8 Ball. And for lack of a better description, I'd have to say it's sort of Circus Calliope style, and the I guess Carnival Barker vocals, really not it. Ringmaster vocals, maybe something like that. Just the whole thing gave me the idea of like vaudeville or old shows, old time shows in the Victorian age, or a circus. That's kind of the current that feels with it, that informs what they have been doing throughout most of the album. It's very stylized and it's very unique, and it didn't really work as well for me. It's definitely a notable piece, and it definitely stands out. It might work well for some people, and maybe not as well for others. It kind of, for me, jumped out as that song I didn't care for that much out of an album of really strong songs. It's not horrible, but I don't know. I think that style immediately says to me somebody's going for a certain tone and a certain idea in a way that, I don't know, maybe it's more because it's more blatant than I like. I like things more subtle sometimes, but not always. But then in the end, maybe it just didn't work as well for me as the other ones. The tracks that did stand out now, in particular, We Are Strangers. That's the one I mentioned. Like, it opens with this kind of cool processed vocals. I don't know, it reminds me of vocoder. These vocals all over ambient keys, and again, the light drums, but with urgency, but then picks up tempo after the first chorus. Nice vocals, nice harmonies, and the processing is kind of added in there as well. Really is a very cool thing, and I feel like it carries a lot of emotion, a lot of power, a lot of urgency. And if there is what one might want to call a pop hook on this album, this is it. Definite earworm. Song that to me is a paean to ambition, but also the price of it. Just really like that song. That one is very much one that sticks in my head and has gone on the list for contenders of Song of the Year. So I think it might fit on there depending on exactly how long I make that list. We'll see where it goes. The other one is Gingerbread Men. This one, again, fits in that wheelhouse that I talked about, but I like it's lightly insistent beat and restrained instrumentation. Bit of a slow, dark burn, or a dark, slow burn, if you like to call it. It's atmospheric. It reminds me in some ways, in some parts, of like this Alan Parsons Deep album cut, with the same way that it handles the instrumental mid-sections, especially the part where it's very bass-driven, mid-section, rhythmic. It's got a mysterious tone to it. Really cool song. I like this one. And once again, we're talking lyrics about consequences and the aftermath. Aftermath is a good song, or a good word to talk about a lot of what goes on here. So in the end, for me, I think that 3.81 really nails where this album lands for me in comparison to the other ones I've reviewed this year. I dig it. I like it a lot. And it certainly is one that is well placed to fit into my top albums of the year. If it doesn't, it just going to miss by that much. We'll see where it goes, because I think there are some that are very close in score and ones I'm going to need to go back and listen over and really decide, all right, how do I get these ties broken? How do I fit things in where they go? This one's absolutely in the running, though. Meanwhile, what are your thoughts? Hey, longtime Gazpacho fans out there, what do you folks think? How do you think this one fits within their catalog? How do you feel about the wait and what you got for the wait, the final product after 5 years? Those of you that aren't familiar, those of you that just love prog, what do you think? How does this album rank within albums of the year of 2025? We're nearly at the end of the year, and certainly December is going to be about me putting lists together and not reviewing new albums at that point. So we're really coming up to the final lap, the final quarter, as we come into the end of 2025. It's time to decide who ranks where. Where do you think this one fits for you? So meanwhile, while you're doing that, leaving a comment, hopefully, don't forget, like, subscribe. At least do the latter if you don't want to like. You don't have to like everything I do, but follow along for the stuff in the future that you will like, I hope. And finally, I leave you with the reminder to never fear to deviate from the norm. And as always, keep it proggy.